Welcome back to the studio. Today we're going to be working on, guess what? It's the Dog Park versus Alley Cat block of the month. We are up to block number 7, if you can believe it. And that's block number 7 on both sides, Dog Park and Alley Cat. We have the whole kit instructions here. I have both of my kits for this particular block out, and I also have my background fabric for each. So I'm going to go ahead and, guess what, pull the camera in so you guys can keep up as I quickly put together these two blocks. Man, you were so energized. It was so exciting to watch. This is our overall instructions for after we complete the blocks. But you can see we're on block number 7. So we're almost into the 3rd row. We just have one more row after that. So this will be wrapping up in just a few months. We are going to be working on these two here. And I'm going to start, I think, with the dogs first, because dogs are always quicker. They don't have the freckles and the whiskers, so they always go much quicker than the cats. I'm going to get my pieces spread out for the dog first onto the back of the light board, and I'll put the cat aside for now, and then we'll get started. And if you notice, we have our Fading Flying Geese quilt top on the ironing board, and there's one behind me, and that's because I just finished up a video. It's already on the books, should be posting in the next couple weeks or so, so keep an eye out for that. This is always how I like to get started on my blocks. I always like to get the paper ironed just to get out any creases. I have that underneath my background fabric. I have my color cover page here, so I can reference that if I have any questions about the placement of anything, and I've already done that. And I also have my pieces laid out pretty much in conjunction with how they're actually going to be on the background. Now remember that all of our pieces, the fabric is pre-selected for you, so pretty much in general what you see on the square here is what you will see in your kit. The fabric's already pre-selected. It's also pre-layered with Steam-A-Seam 2, so it has a fusible webbing on the back, and it's been laser cut, which gives you a very precision cut to maintain that accurate shape as you're doing the applique. I always think also that the laser cutting almost burnishes the edge, seals it in a way that it prevents it from fraying as much as if you cut it with scissors. I don't know that factually, but it just seems like the shape always has a really crisp edge to it, unlike if you were doing that with scissors or some other fashion. So I have my pieces laid out. I've got my one basic tool here. It's just a flower head pen, and I use that sometimes to score the back of the paper if I have a piece of a stubborn backing that isn't coming off. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my light box on. I already have my background fabric positioned, and I'm going to put my first piece on, and just with the heat of my hand, that fusible web is going to stick enough to keep that piece in place, but it's still repositionable until I fuse it. So I'm just going to go ahead down the line and put these pieces on in the order in which I believe they go. And you can always tell if a shape has a partial dotted line on the shape, that indicates that it goes back behind another shape. And some of this is just a little bit of guesswork or trial and error to see which piece would go down first before another one. But as I said, these are just temporarily in place, very similar to a post-it note. They're tacky enough to stay in place, but they're not fused permanently yet until we hit it with the steam iron. And I say steam iron, but I don't actually keep water in my iron. I've heard people say over and over, how do you find an iron that doesn't leak? And I always say it won't leak if you don't put water in it. And can you see what I did here? That is clearly a mistake. I haven't even put my head down yet, and I'm already putting the muzzle. So I can easily peel that back up and then go ahead and get my muzzle in place. Now at this point, I've got so many layers of fabric on there, it's really hard to see where my shapes go, even with the light box. Now if I turned the light off in the studio, I might be able to see it a little bit better. But another thing you can do is just slide it off to the side, and I can go ahead and get a pretty close approximation visually of where these pieces go without it creating too much of an issue. I also could have done the muzzle on the pattern and then put the nose on there and then moved the whole unit over. That would have worked also. And I don't know if you noticed on this particular block, but his left eye is a different size than his right eye, and that just kind of gives him a quirky expression. He's like, huh? No food in my dog bowl? And these ultra suede pieces are always the hardest to place. They don't seem to stick as well with just this, before you fuse it. They're a little heavier, so they don't stick on their own. So I have to be careful with those. And also it takes a little bit longer for the heat to penetrate through that thicker material to fuse it. So when we get to the fusing part of this, I'm going to fuse it from the front and from the back, just to make sure that the heat penetrates through all the layers. So just that quick, we have block number 7 on the dog part complete, aside from the fusing section of it. So I'm going to go ahead and set that aside, and we'll get out the components for the cat section, Applique, on this same block. I referenced this in the dog section. You could go ahead, when you have compound pieces, to layer the compound pieces before you get them onto the background. So that's what I'm going to do in this case. I'm going to position the ear, the outer ear, directly on the template, and pull the paper backing off of the inner ear section. And now I'm able to see where exactly that goes on the ear, so that I can have it in the correct position later when I put it onto the background. And this paper just peels off really easily. I very rarely have any problem peeling off any of the paper. If you do, you can always just score the back of the paper with the point of a seam ripper or the head of a needle, and that will help you get the paper off from the center out. Also, sometimes I'll do that when I'm working with a circle, just to make sure that I don't fray the edge of the circle in any way. But you can see scoring the center can really help you get that paper backing off without an issue. The other thing I could do is the eyes, since those are a little harder to see once you get through the head and the background as well. And that'll help us get an exact location on these pieces. If for any reason you peel the paper off and you're finding that the adhesive backing is sticking to the paper instead of the fabric, you can always put the paper back on, hit it with an iron for about 6 or 7 seconds to refuse it, allow that to cool completely, and then go back to peeling the paper off. Sometimes it just didn't get fused properly, maybe not enough steam or not enough heat in the manufacturing process. but we can always duplicate that at home fairly easily. So now I have those pieces all ready, and when I get to putting these on the background, that'll go a little bit faster. I always like to start with the neck because that gives us a pretty good direction as to where everything else is located, and it does go underneath the muzzle, so that's helpful also. We've already started to peel this piece off, so that'll come off pretty quickly. And I'm just going to lift up the edges a little bit of the head. I should have put the ears on first, but again, that's not an issue with this because you can see it's completely repositionable until we get it fused. That's why when we were developing this product, we went with Steam-A-Seam 2 because it has a tackiness that allows things to stick in place, but it's also completely repositionable until we fuse it. These components can sometimes be a little bit static cling, and they might stick to the inside of the shipping bag, so you have to be careful when you're taking them out to make sure that one of the components, like one of these little freckles or one of the whiskers, isn't inadvertently stuck to the inside of your bag. I also have to be careful with my light box because the light box edge is black, and sometimes one of these little eyes or freckles will be hiding on my light box border and make it really hard to see. A couple months ago I was doing one and I lost one of the freckles, and I found it after the video was over and I have it put aside. I still haven't pulled the block back out to give the cat its missing freckle. And I feel a little bad because I know that cat is roaming around all over town looking for that lost freckle, but I have it tucked aside. I'm going to have to look at that with the light off because I can't see if I'm getting the paper or the webbing. Because this section of the process is really just about placement and peeling, you could have one of the younger members of your family helping with this, and then when you get to the ironing section, depending on their age, you could either provide supervision as they fuse, or you could do the fusing portion yourself. Getting down to the last few freckles. If I wanted to cheat, I would peel off these papers off these little tiny dots before I started. But I always like to show in real time just how easy this process is. It's just that these little dots can sometimes be a booger. Now we're just down to whiskers, and then on to fusing. Does he look lopsided? I wonder what the whiskers do. Are they like antennas? They can't be for smelling, I don't think. Of course, maybe it's not polite to ask. I don't want people asking me what my whiskers do. And here's the final whisker. And just like that, we have all of the placement done for both of the dog park and the alley cat. I always like to check these just before I fuse because they don't have the same stickiness because of their thickness as the other pieces, and they will get shifted pretty easy. So that's one thing to keep an eye on. Any of these pieces that are like ultra suede, you just have to double check. But I'm going to go ahead and switch out the light box, get my ironing set up, and we'll go ahead and fuse these and be on our way. I have a really large Teflon pressing sheet in the back of each of the blocks underneath each, and I'm going to use that to help fuse these pieces in place. I don't have any water in my iron so that it won't leak that way, and my iron is heating up right now. What I use is just a mister bottle, and I've just labeled mine with one of the Tattoo Elementz samples that we have for shows sometimes when we go do shows. Sometimes they're also in our introductory pack. But I'm going to go ahead and moisten these component pieces because Steam 2 does require moisture to activate the fusible web. And I've placed the Teflon pressing sheet over top that as well. So I'm going to increase the time that I allow these to fuse just by a few seconds to compensate for the iron heat getting through the Teflon pressing sheet. I'm not going to hold it in place long enough for its actual fusing, but I do want to just show you that I am fusing that over the Teflon pressing sheet. This is really important, especially for me, because sometimes I get distracted or impatient and I start pushing the iron. And when you push the iron when it's down while you're fusing, the edge of the iron can catch the edge of one of your fusible applique pieces and scrunch it over, and then you're ironing it and fusing it in place, and what you've done is fused a scrunched piece of applique shape and marring your block. So the Teflon pressing sheet helps me prevent me from distorting one of the edges, but also it protects the iron and it protects the fabric from any kind of glue being transferred in the wrong place. And so that's a good thing for me all around. Well worth the purchase of a Teflon pressing sheet. I just happened to have gotten the largest one that I could find, and I believe I got that at Laura Heine's booth, but she also sells these on her website. So that's one thing you could check out if you're looking for one and having trouble finding it. Of course, nowadays almost everything is on Amazon. But I made sure that all of my pieces are in place before I started fusing. And when I get to a place that I'm happy, I could go ahead and flip these blocks over, and I will go ahead and re-hit it with the mister, especially where the applique actually is. And when you do that, you can actually see it kind of shine through, and you can see where it's fused or not even. So on the back, I don't have to worry about lifting up the edge of any pieces, so I can now go ahead and directly hit the applique block of the month on the back directly with the iron, really making sure that we're getting a complete fuse between the component shapes and the background fabric. And because I did a pretty good job of saturating that back with the spray bottle, I really can tell when the fabric's dry. I know I've pretty well fused the pieces in place. And I really like to focus, as I said, on those ultra suede pieces because they're so thick. I really want to make sure that we fuse those all the way through so we don't have any issue later with them coming off. All of our samples are quilted, but we don't top stitch them or edge stitch them in any way. They do get quilted, so some of the pieces have quilting stitches on top, and also we use monofilament so that it's clear and doesn't distract from the shape. But these are completely permanent if fused properly. You cannot overfuse Steam-O-Seam 2. It's not going to evaporate into the cosmos. So if anything, you would be under fusing it. Very impossible for you to overfuse it unless you actually burn up the fabric. If you are top stitching or quilting and you're getting a lot of the fusible web gumming up on the needle, that's an indicator that you have not fused properly, not fused long enough, and there's too much excess material free to get stuck on the needle. So just like that, we have both of our dog park and alley cat block of the months finished this month. And if you would do me a favor, we don't have names for these two critters. They need to be named. So if in the comments section you would give a name to our block number 7 dog park and our block number 7 alley cat, they would both appreciate a name. It will be almost like a gender reveal party because by the name we'll know if they're male or female. So we'll look forward to your comments on names for these two adorable critters. And that's it for our block of the month for this month. Thank you for joining us, and we hope to see you soon for another exciting video. Could be applique, it could be quilting, it could be piecing. Who knows what it will be? But we'll be here. We hope you will too.